How did the United States overtake the British Empire to become the world's superpower? Part 1. When the British Empire ruled the world. There was a time when, if you looked at a world map, one color stood out more than any other. That color belonged to the British Empire. Across Asia, Africa, North America, the Caribbean, the Middle East, and Australia, British influence stretched across nearly every continent on Earth. People used to say, "The sun never sets on the British Empire." This was not just a famous saying. It reflected reality. At any given moment, the sun was shining on at least one part of the vast British Empire. By the mid-19th century, Britain had become the most powerful nation in the world. It possessed the world's largest navy. It controlled much of global maritime trade. London had become the financial capital of the world. Countries across the globe borrowed money from British banks. British-made goods filled markets on nearly every continent. This was the age of the Industrial Revolution. Steam engines, modern factories, railways, and powerful ships gave Britain an enormous technological advantage over every other nation. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic Ocean, the United States was still a young country. After gaining independence in 1776, America was focused on building its economy, infrastructure, and political institutions. At that time, very few people could have imagined that this young nation would one day become the world's greatest superpower. In 1861, the United States entered the Civil War. For 4 long years, the conflict devastated the nation. But after the war ended, America entered a new era of extraordinary growth. Railroads expanded rapidly across the country. The steel industry flourished. The nation's vast reserves of oil, coal, and natural resources fueled rapid industrial development. Millions of immigrants arrived from Europe, bringing new skills, labor, and ideas. While Britain remained the world's largest empire, the United States was quietly becoming the world's greatest industrial power. Even so, Britain still dominated global politics, naval power, colonial influence, and international trade. The British flag flew over territories around the world, and many believed the empire would remain unbeatable forever. But history has a way of changing the course of even the greatest powers. The stronger an empire becomes, the greater the challenges it eventually faces. At the beginning of the 20th century, a series of events began to shake the very foundations of the British Empire. Those same events would ultimately pave the way for the rise of the United States as the world's leading power. At the time, however, no one could see what was coming. Everything would begin to change because of a single conflict, a war that would reshape the political and economic future of the entire world. That war was World War I, and it was from this moment that the slow decline. World War I, the war that changed the balance of global power. The year was 1914. Europe was on the edge of crisis. For years, military alliances, political rivalries, and an intense arms race had pushed the continent toward conflict. Yet few imagined that a single assassination would ignite one of the deadliest wars in human history. On June 28, 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, was assassinated in Sarajevo. Within weeks, Europe was engulfed in war. On one side stood Britain, France, and Russia. On the other were Germany, Austria-Hungary, and their allies. At the time, the British Empire was the largest empire the world had ever seen. Millions of soldiers from India, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and Britain's African colonies joined the war effort. In the beginning, many people believed the war would end within a few months. They were wrong. The conflict dragged on year after year. Every day, thousands of soldiers lost their lives on the battlefields of Europe. The cost of the war became enormous. Britain had to spend vast amounts of money on weapons, ammunition, warships, food supplies, and medical equipment. The longer the war continued, the greater the financial burden became. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic Ocean, the United States remained officially neutral during the early years of the war. Instead of fighting, America supplied Britain and its allies with food, steel, weapons, vehicles, and industrial goods. American factories operated around the clock to meet the growing demand. As the war intensified, American businesses flourished. Britain and its allies borrowed billions of dollars from American banks to finance the war. This marked a historic turning point. The nation that had once financed much of the world was now borrowing money from the United States. For the first time, America's financial influence began to rival Britain's. In 1917, the situation changed dramatically. Germany's unrestricted submarine warfare threatened American ships and trade. The United States officially entered the war. Fresh American troops, modern equipment, and the country's enormous industrial strength helped shift the balance of the conflict. By November 1918, World War I had come to an end. Germany had been defeated. Britain was among the victorious nations. But victory came at a tremendous cost. Millions of lives had been lost. The British economy was deeply weakened. The government was burdened with massive debts. Its global dominance had begun to fade. The United States, however, emerged from the war in a much stronger position. Unlike Europe, its cities and industries had escaped destruction. Its factories had expanded. Its banks had become the world's leading lenders. Its economy had grown to an unprecedented level. New York began to challenge London as the world's New York began to challenge London as the world's financial center. Many historians consider this period the beginning of America's rise as the world's leading economic power. Still, the British Empire had not collapsed. Its vast colonies remained under British control. Its navy was still one of the strongest in the world. Many believed Britain would recover and reclaim its unquestioned dominance. But history had another surprise waiting. Just over a decade later, the world would be shaken by an economic catastrophe unlike anything it had ever seen. It would become known as